Drizzle is a high-performance ORM that lets you query your database more than twice as fast as Prisma. But that's not even my favorite thing about Drizzle. My favorite thing is the incredible developer experience. In this video, I'm going to demo a few of the core features of Drizzle so you can see firsthand how this tool makes working with your database super easy. I'm going to cover database schemas, migrations, queries, and finally Drizzle Studio. Let's jump in. Don't worry about coding along with me. There's a link to the code in the description so you can review all of the code whenever you want. When working with databases, the first thing you need to do is create your tables. And this is what it looks like if you create your tables with raw SQL. And this is what it looks like if you create your tables with Drizzle. So what's the difference, right? Okay, well, let me break it down. So here, if I were to misspell something, let's say I put null as in just NUL, well, my code editor is not giving me any feedback. It looks like it's all happy sunshine, nothing's wrong, when in reality, as soon as I try and start up my app and it tries to create this table, this is going to crash. So I like to find my bugs early and be given a warning. And if we come over to the Drizzle example, if I were to delete a letter here, TypeScript immediately alerts us that, hey, this is not valid, there's a problem. And that's amazing. That's a great developer experience. So we know right away that there's an error and we don't have to wait for our application to crash before we find that bug. And then on top of that, over here with raw SQL, TypeScript doesn't know the structure of this table, which is a bummer, making it harder to query. But if we hover over our to-dos table here, TypeScript knows exactly the structure of this table, what columns are on there and what the data types are. And that's going to come into play later when we actually want to query our table. It's going to make things super easy, and we're going to get all sorts of autocomplete and error messages to warn us if we're doing something wrong. Let's say that I need to add another column to my table here. That's where migrations come in. I can update this schema here. So we have a user schema. Let's say I want to add the age. And let's make that an integer. Now, this doesn't actually change our database. If I come over to our DB SQLite and I click on the users table, we can see that we have ID, email, and password, but the age is not in there yet. So what we need to do is we need to write some SQL that will actually update our database. And luckily, Drizzle can do that for us, which is super handy. So if we come over to the package JSON, I have a script, generate migrations, that runs the Drizzle Kit, and this will actually generate us some SQL to create that new column for our table. So let's go ahead and run it. And we can see that it has created a new file for us. So if we open up our Drizzle folder, we can see this auto-generated file, and we can read the SQL, and we could change it if we need to, but it is doing exactly what we want. We're updating the users table, and we're adding that age column. Fantastic. So now the next thing we can do is we want to run that SQL. So we have a migrate command, the Drizzle Kit migrate, and this is going to run that SQL and add that new column to our table. Now, if we jump over to our database SQLite and we click on our users table, we can see we now have an age column added to our table. And that's my 2-minute TED Talk on migrations. So here I have a function that inserts a to-do into the database. And you can see my query is written with raw SQL. And that presents the same problem we saw earlier, where if I were to misspell something, I get no feedback from my editor. So I wouldn't know that this query was bad until I actually tried to run it or started up my application. And then if we come down here to my result where I run the query, I had to manually create a to-do type because TypeScript was unaware of what this query would return. So I created that type in a separate file here, and the problem with this is that if we are updating our database and we're adding new columns, then we need to update our type as well. And when you're working on a team with a bunch of other engineers, unfortunately, the types can fall out of sync. People forget to update the types, and they are not in sync with what's actually in the database, and that's a problem. But luckily, Drizzle is going to solve both of those problems for us. So let's go ahead and take a look at what this would look like if we queried our database with Drizzle instead. So the first thing I need to do is update this type. So this is the database type for Bun SQL, but Drizzle has its own type for Bun SQLite. So now that we have our type updated there, we can say that we'll use our database and we can do an insert. And as you can see, we're getting autocomplete, which is amazing. And then we can insert into the table of our choosing. So we will do the to-dos table. And that comes from our schema that we were just looking at, to-dos table. And then from there, we can say we want to insert the values, and we can provide an object and give it our ID. And then we can take the to-do that's provided to this function, and we can spread that. So all of those properties will be added in here. And then we can do returning, and finally get. And as you can see, this looks very similar to our raw SQL. We have an insert into our to-dos table, the values we want to insert, and returning the data. So it looks almost exactly the same, or at least it reads the same, which is really nice. So if you know SQL, then you're going to feel very comfortable with Drizzle's querying. And on top of that, we get all that autocomplete, and we get some type safety. So if I were to put some kind of extra variable in here and I hover over it, TypeScript is going to tell me somewhere deep down in here that object literal may only specify known properties and help does not exist. So it's telling me that, hey, help is a bad value. We cannot include that. So we're getting feedback from our editor before we ever running our app, which is amazing. So as you can see, Drizzle makes querying our database so much easier with type safety and autocomplete. I absolutely love it. And then the last thing that I need to do here is just assign this to the result. Click save, and everything is good. The last thing I want to show you is Drizzle Studio. So here in my package.json, I have a script for Studio, which runs Drizzle Kit Studio, and this will fire up a GUI in our browser for us to look at our data and run queries. So let's check it out. Now I can go ahead and click on this link. Now here in our browser, we can view and interact with our database. We can see our users table, to-dos table, our migrations. We can even filter down this data. So we can go and select what kind of columns we want to look at. And we can even export our data to JSON or CSV or Excel. And we could query our data with raw SQL if we wanted. But they also give us the option to query our data with Drizzle syntax. So this is a great way to prototype out our queries, and we get autocomplete in here too, which is really nice. So I could select a limit of 10 from the to-dos table, run that query, and get back my data. So as you can see, the Drizzle team has invested a lot of time and effort into making the developer experience incredible. So if you're starting up a new TypeScript project, I highly recommend using Drizzle as your ORM. Happy coding and Godspeed.